Jake was a young man who lived a comfortable life, avoiding anything that made him feel nervous or exposed. Public speaking, in particular, was his greatest fear. He avoided it at all costs, convinced that he'd make a fool of himself if he ever had to stand in front of people. But everything changed when Jake's boss assigned him to lead an important presentation for his team. Jake's heart sank. He had no idea how to handle his fear, so he turned to his grandfather for advice. His grandfather, a wise and patient man, had lived through countless experiences. He had faced many of his own fears and understood what it meant to be truly courageous. As Jake sat down with his grandfather one evening, he shared his worries, hoping for some guidance. His grandfather listened carefully, a gentle smile on his face, and then said, "Jake, let me tell you something. Fear is like a shadow. It only grows larger when you run from it. But if you turn and face it, you'll find it's not as big as you thought." Jake was intrigued, so his grandfather continued. "Years ago, I used to be afraid of speaking in public, just like you. I was always worried about what people would think. But one day, I had no choice. I was asked to speak at an important event, and running away wasn't an option." "What did you do?" Jake asked, genuinely curious. "I was scared, of course," his grandfather chuckled. "My hands were shaking, my heart was racing, but I told myself, this fear won't control me. I took a deep breath, walked onto that stage, and just started talking. At first, my voice trembled, but the more I spoke, the easier it became. By the end, I wasn't afraid anymore. I learned that fear fades when we step into it." Jake nodded, feeling a bit more hopeful. His grandfather's story made him realize that fear didn't have to be permanent. But he still felt unsure. "What if I make a mistake, Grandpa? What if people laugh?" His grandfather placed a reassuring hand on Jake's shoulder. "Mistakes are a part of learning, my boy. People might laugh, and that's okay. But you'll find that most people are kinder than you think. They understand what it feels like to be nervous. What matters is that you show up and try. That's true bravery." Jake thought about his grandfather's words. He realized that avoiding his fear had only made it stronger. With a deep breath, he decided he would try to face it. That evening, he practiced his presentation in front of a mirror, feeling a bit silly but remembering his grandfather's advice. When he stumbled over words, he reminded himself that it was all part of learning. The day of the presentation came, and as Jake stood in front of his team, his hands felt clammy, and his heart pounded. He glanced at his grandfather, who had come to support him. Seeing the encouraging smile on his face gave Jake the strength he needed. He took a deep breath and began speaking, his voice shaky at first, but gradually growing steadier. When he finished, there was a round of applause. Jake felt a wave of relief and pride. He had faced his fear and come out stronger on the other side. Later, he thanked his grandfather for his wisdom. His grandfather gave him a warm smile. "Remember, Jake, courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about facing your fear, even when you are. Each time you confront your fear, it gets a little smaller, and you grow a little stronger." From that day on, Jake approached challenges with a new perspective. Whether it was public speaking or any other fear, he would always remember his wise grandfather's words.